My name is Vivian Hale. I am 27 years old. Once, I was just a young marketing specialist in New York. Ambitious, determined, maybe a little naive. People used to tell me I was sharp, that my future was already paved in gold, and beside me stood a man I thought was my forever, Adrian Mercer. Back then, I believed in fairy tales. Adrian and I met in college. He was charming, intelligent, the kind of man who could light up a room with just a smile. He made me laugh. He made me dream. He made me believe that love could conquer everything. I held his hand through sleepless nights of exams, through long subway rides, through the messy beginnings of adulthood. In my heart, I was certain he was mine, and I was his. Vivian, he once whispered to me on a rooftop in Brooklyn. His arm wrapped around me. The city lights flickered like stars below us. One day, it'll be just you and me against the world. I smiled then, foolishly believing. Always, I said, you and me. But time has a cruel way of testing promises. When Adrian won a scholarship to study in France, I was proud of him. I clapped the loudest at the farewell dinner. I kissed him at the airport as if my lips could keep him tied to me. He promised to call every day, to write every week, to never let distance change us. For a while, he kept that promise. His voice through late-night calls warmed me. His emails made me smile at my desk. I told myself this was only temporary, that our love was strong enough to outlast oceans. But slowly, the calls grew shorter, then fewer. Weeks passed without a single message. When I called, he answered with excuses, assignments, deadlines, friends. I told myself he was busy, that Paris was overwhelming, that he still loved me. I convinced myself again and again, because the alternative was too painful. And yet, I felt him slipping away. I could hear it in his voice, cold, distracted, absent. One night, I stayed up until dawn staring at my phone. The silence was deafening. I cried into my pillow, whispering, "Why, Adrian, why are you leaving me like this?" Still, I refused to give up. I wanted to believe in us. I needed to believe. So I made a decision. Reckless, desperate, full of hope. I would go to Paris. I would fly across the ocean to surprise him on my birthday. I thought, if he could see me again, if he could look into my eyes, if he could feel the warmth of my arms, he would remember what we had. That hope was the only thing I carried with me when the plane landed at Charles de Gaulle. Paris smelled of rain and coffee. Its streets glimmered under the gray sky. I held on to my dream as I found his address. I climbed the narrow stairs of his apartment building, and I stood before the door. My hands shook as I raised them to knock. My heart raced as I whispered to myself, "This is it. He will be so happy to see me." But fate can be merciless. The door was ajar. I pushed it open quietly, a smile already forming on my lips. Inside, I heard laughter, Adrian's laughter. For a moment, I felt relief, until I saw her, a woman, beautiful, elegant, with long dark hair and a French accent dripping from her voice. And there he was, Adrian Mercer, my Adrian, with his arms around her waist, his lips pressed against hers. The world stopped. My lungs froze. My heart shattered in a single breath. I staggered back. My suitcase slipped from my hands. My voice barely escaped. "Adrian!" He turned, startled, his face drained of color. But before he could speak, the woman, Selena, looked at me with a smirk that burned into my soul. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't ashamed. She was triumphant. I ran. Down the stairs. Out into the Paris rain. My chest collapsing with every step. My birthday gift was betrayal. That night, I found a cheap guest house near the station. The room smelled of smoke and mildew, but I didn't care. I curled up on the bed, trembling, tears soaking the pillow. My reflection in the cracked mirror mocked me. The girl I saw wasn't Vivian Hale anymore. She was a fool, I whispered to myself. It's over. Everything's over. But life still had one more cruelty waiting for me. The fire started in the middle of the night. Flames climbed the walls. Smoke filled my lungs. Screams echoed in the hallway. The door creaked open, and there he was, Adrian Mercer, the man I had loved with every part of me. And in his arms was another woman. Her name, I would later learn, was Selena Moreau. But in that instant, she was simply the thief of my life. Adrian's lips were pressed against hers. His hands held her tightly as if she were the center of his world. My world shattered in silence. I couldn't breathe. My throat closed. My heart splintered into 1,000 sharp pieces. The smile that had begun to form on my face froze and then died. I staggered back, my suitcase falling with a thud against the floor. Adrian! My voice cracked like broken glass. He turned, eyes wide, color draining from his face. Vivian? He whispered, as if my very presence was a ghost haunting him. But before he could take a step toward me, before he could explain, before he could lie, Selene looked at me, and she smiled. Not a kind smile, not a polite one. A sharp, triumphant curl of her lips, as if she had already won. In her eyes, I was nothing, just a shadow, already erased. I ran. My legs carried me down the stairs, out into the Paris rain, my chest collapsing with every step. Raindrops mixed with tears until I couldn't tell which was which. I stumbled through streets I didn't know, blinded by the storm and by my own heartbreak. My birthday gift was betrayal. That night, I found a cheap guest house near the train station. The hallway smelled of mold. The sheets were thin. The ceiling leaked. But I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed, my body trembling, my eyes swollen from crying, my heart hollow. The mirror across the room showed me a stranger, a pale, fragile girl, eyes red, shoulders hunched, a fool who had crossed an ocean for a man who had already chosen someone else. I whispered to my reflection, "It's over. Everything's over." The words broke inside my chest. I curled up beneath the blanket, pulling it over my head as if it could hide me from reality. But reality has sharp claws, and it always finds a way in. Sometime past midnight, I woke to the sound of screaming. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I smelled it. Smoke, thick, choking, filling the air. I sat up, coughing, heart pounding in panic. Outside my door, flames were already crawling up the wallpaper. The wood cracked, sparks rained down like hellfire. I stumbled into the hallway. People were pushing, shoving, trying to escape. The heat was unbearable. "Help! Somebody help me!" A man shouted as he banged against a door. A woman clutched her child, her eyes wide with terror as the fire closed in. I tried to run. I tried to find the exit, but the smoke blinded me. My lungs filled with poison. My skin burned as sparks kissed my arms. The stairwell collapsed in front of me. A wave of heat surged forward, knocking me to the ground. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the roar of the flames. For a moment, I thought this was it, that my story ended here, alone, ashes scattered in a city that had already broken me. When I woke again, the world was white, the sterile white of a hospital room. My face was wrapped in layers of bandages, my body heavy, stiff, broken. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But I could feel the pain, the searing, unrelenting pain that told me something inside me had been carved away forever. Days later, when they let me see my reflection, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her skin was marred, her features twisted by scars. The girl who had once been praised for her beauty was gone, and with her went Vivian Hale. I thought I would crumble, that I would let despair consume me, but something else took root instead. Anger, pure, burning, relentless. I whispered to myself in the hospital bed, through cracked lips and trembling breath. I thought I would break. I thought I would fall apart. But no, I won't. I can't. And then, with all the strength I had left, I will not die like this. Adrian, Celine, you destroyed me, but one day I will destroy you. Voiceover, steady, cold, resolute. I thought I would collapse. I thought I would surrender to the pain, but no, hatred kept me alive. Hatred gave me breath. Hatred became my reason, and it will carry me until the day they both pay the price. They told me I was lucky to survive, but when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see luck. I saw ruins. The girl who had once been praised for her beauty was gone. Her face was a battlefield. Scars traced across my skin like cruel signatures left by fire. And yet, beneath the pain, something stirred. Not despair, not surrender, something darker, something stronger. The first time the doctors suggested reconstruction, I almost laughed. What's the point? I whispered to myself. The man I loved already chose someone else. But at night, when the pain made sleep impossible, I began to think, what if I could erase the broken face? What if I could bury Vivian Hale and create someone new, someone they wouldn't see coming? So I agreed. The surgeries began. Endless cycles of knives and sutures, of waking to the sting of disinfectant and the weight of bandages. Every morning I would trace the fresh scars with trembling fingers and whisper, "Not yet, but soon." The pain was relentless, but I welcomed it, because each cut, each stitch, was not just repairing me, it was transforming me. One surgeon looked at me after a long procedure and said softly, "You are healing remarkably well, Miss Hale." I corrected him. My name is not Hale anymore. He blinked, confused. But I smiled through swollen lips. That was the day I decided. Vivian Hale had died in the fire. From her ashes, a new name would rise. Selena Ward. Recovery was slow. Months stretched into years. But as my body healed, my resolve hardened. I worked. Harder than ever before. I drowned myself in the office. In reports, in strategies. In late-night presentations that left others exhausted but left me sharper, hungrier. Colleagues whispered about my discipline. Executives praised my results. Competitors hated the way I always walked out of a meeting with the upper hand. None of them knew the truth, that every step I took, every deal I closed, every smile I flashed was sharpening a blade I would one day use. 3 years passed, and by then, Selena Ward was not just alive. She was untouchable. A woman in tailored suits and high heels that echoed like gunshots down marble hallways. Her hair perfect, her skin flawless, her voice calm and controlled, a woman men desired and women envied, but no one truly knew, because beneath the surface, the old wounds still burned. At night, when the city quieted, I would stand before the mirror. I would stare into the flawless reflection, the face built from fire and steel, and I would whisper their names. Adrian, Celine. Each syllable was poison, each whisper a promise. They had taken everything from me, but one day, I would take everything from them. Then came the morning when fate handed me the first piece of my revenge. I was sitting in a boardroom skimming through files when I heard his name, Adrian Mercer. It cut through me like a blade. I froze, but only for a moment. My colleagues didn't notice. They kept talking. Adrian had returned to the States. He was making connections, rebuilding his career. And he was engaged. To her. To Celine Moreau. The laugh that slipped from my lips startled even me. Cold. Bitter. Almost sweet. 3 years I had hidden in plain sight. 3 years I had clawed my way back from ashes. And now, the universe had delivered them back into my orbit. Not just together, not just happy, but vulnerable, planning a wedding, planning a future, believing their sins had been buried with the girl they destroyed. They thought I was gone, but I was standing right there, stronger than ever. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine. I sat by the window, the lights of New York glittering below me like scattered stars. I touched the glass to my lips, then raised it in a toast to the shadows. To the girl who had died in Paris, to the fire that had burned me into someone new, and to the 2 people who had no idea their reckoning was coming. Let the game begin, I whispered, and for the first time in years, my smile felt real. Not because of joy, not because of love, but because revenge had finally begun to breathe. The moment I learned about the partnership with Mercer & Co., I knew this wasn't coincidence. It was an opportunity. And opportunities like this don't come twice. So I raised my hand during the meeting. Calm, steady, almost casual. I'll take this project, I said. No one argued. They didn't know what it meant. But I did. It meant stepping back into Adrian Mercer's orbit. Not as the girl he once betrayed, not as Vivian Hale, but as Selena Ward, the woman who would destroy him from the inside. I spent nights drawing out the strategy in my mind. Adrian had always been predictable, ambitious, charming, but weak when it came to desire. That was his flaw, and I would exploit it. This wasn't about seduction for pleasure. It wasn't about attraction. It was about leverage. If I could entangle him in my web, if I could make him betray Celine the way he once betrayed me, I would hold his downfall in the palm of my hand. Our first meeting was simple. He walked into the room, confident as ever, extending his hand with that same smile I used to melt for. "Selena Ward, isn't it? I've heard great things," he said. I took his hand, letting my gaze linger just long enough to spark curiosity. "The honor's mine, Mr. Mercer." He didn't know it then, but the hunt had already begun. Over the next weeks, I played my part. Professional, charming, always composed, but every word I chose, every glance, every pause, was deliberate. I let my laughter linger when he made a joke. I leaned in just enough during discussions. I held his gaze a second longer than necessary. Tiny sparks that I knew would ignite a fire. At the office, he watched me with interest. At dinners, his attention lingered too long. On late-night calls, his voice softened, drifting from business into personal questions. "What about you, Selena?" he asked once. "Someone like you surely doesn't go home to an empty apartment." I smiled into the silence, letting it stretch. "Some things," I said, "are better left unsaid," and I could hear the hunger in his laugh. But this was never about his desire. It was about my design. I wasn't just drawing him closer. I was mapping the path forward. Every message he sent, every look, every moment of weakness became evidence. Evidence I would later use. Because I didn't just want him unfaithful. I wanted him exposed. One evening, after a corporate dinner, he offered to walk me to my car. The city lights glowed above us. The night air was cool, carrying the hum of traffic and distant music. We stopped beneath a street lamp. He looked at me too long. "Selena," he murmured, "there's something about you. Something I can't explain." I tilted my head, feigned hesitation. "Careful, Adrian," I whispered. "You're a married man, or soon to be." He chuckled nervously, correcting himself. "Engaged, not married yet." I let the silence linger, then smiled, slow and deliberate. My hand brushed his arm, light as a feather. "Still," I said softly, "some lines shouldn't be crossed." But my eyes dared him, and he crossed them. The kiss was clumsy at first, hesitant, then desperate. His lips pressed against mine as though he had been starving for me all along. I closed my eyes, not in passion, but in victory, because I knew. Adrian Mercer hadn't changed. He never would. And now, he had given me exactly what I needed. From that moment on, he was mine. Secret meetings, stolen moments, late-night messages sent while Celine slept beside him. He thought it was an affair. But I knew the truth. It was a trap, a carefully laid snare, closing tighter with every step he took. I built the plan like clockwork. First, keep him close. Make him reckless. Make him trust me. Second, collect the proof. Photos, messages, rendezvous recorded in the shadows. Third, introduce myself to Celine. Not as a rival, not as the woman in her fiancé's bed, but as a friend. Someone she could confide in. Someone who would eventually hand her the truth at the perfect moment in the most devastating way. This wasn't just about betraying Adrian. It was about tearing down everything they had built together. Their love, their engagement, their careers. Piece by piece, I would unravel them both, until the only thing left was ruin. One night, as he lay beside me in a hotel room, he whispered, "With you, I feel alive again. I don't know how to stop." I turned toward him, smiling faintly. "You don't have to stop," I said. And inside, I laughed because he was already finished. He just didn't know it yet. When I left him sleeping, I paused at the door. I looked back at the man sprawled across white sheets, tangled in lies of his own making. Once, I had loved him. Now, I pitied him, because Adrian Mercer believed he was keeping a secret. But the truth was far darker. The secret was mine, and soon it would be his destruction. Celine Moreau was everything she wanted the world to see. Polished, beautiful, confident. She walked into rooms like she owned them, her heels clicking like applause. Her perfume trailed behind her, sharp and expensive. But beneath the shine, I saw what others missed: insecurity, vanity, the kind of pride that begged to be shattered. And I would be the one to shatter it. Our introduction was simple. I arranged it carefully: a networking brunch, a gathering of women executives and socialites. I made sure my name was mentioned in the right circles, so when I finally crossed her path, it would feel natural. When our eyes met, I smiled warmly. "Celine Moreau," I said, offering my hand. "I've heard so much about you. It's an honor." She took it with a smirk, her gaze flicking over me like she was measuring a competitor. "I suppose you have," she replied. "It's hard not to hear about me these days." I laughed lightly, as if charmed instead of irritated. And just like that, the game began. Over the next weeks, I became part of her orbit. I let her talk about herself, her accomplishments, her glamorous trips, her upcoming wedding. She loved to brag, and I let her. At dinners, she sipped champagne and leaned close, lowering her voice as if confiding a secret, but always circling back to the same theme. I've built this life, Selena. Everything I have, I deserve it. I nodded, eyes wide, lips parted in admiration. You really are remarkable, I said softly. She smiled then, satisfied, believing she had dazzled me. But while she basked in her own reflection, I was planting shadows. A word here, a sigh there, a look that lingered just a moment too long before I quickly looked away. Subtle, gentle, enough to stir the smallest doubt. One evening, over cocktails in a rooftop bar, she leaned across the table. You know Adrian, don't you? She asked suddenly. My pulse quickened, but my smile never faltered. Of course, I replied. Working with him has been enlightening. She tilted her head, studying me. Enlightening? Oh, I let the word hang in the air, then laughed softly, brushing it aside. Oh, nothing serious. He's charming, isn't he? Always knows how to make people feel important. Her lips tightened almost imperceptibly. That was the first crack. I pretended not to notice. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my drink, letting the silence stretch. Then I added, almost as an afterthought, sometimes I wonder how he balances everything, the work, the pressure, the attention he gets. I glanced at her, eyes wide with feigned innocence. Huh, it must be hard, knowing so many people want him. Celine's smile faltered, just for a second, but I caught it. She recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders. Adrian is loyal, she said firmly. He would never risk what we have. I touched her hand gently across the table, offering a look of reassurance. Of course, I whispered. Of course he wouldn't. But I let my gaze drift, just long enough to make her wonder. That night, as I walked away from her apartment, I smiled to myself. The seed had been planted. It didn't need to be large, just enough for her to water with her own fears. Because Celine's greatest weakness wasn't her pride, it was her ego. And once ego feels threatened, it devours itself. The next time we met, she was different, still radiant, still polished. But there was a sharpness in her tone, a slight edge in her questions. Do you think Adrian spends too much time at the office? She asked suddenly. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Well, he is dedicated. Maybe a little too dedicated sometimes, but that's what makes him successful, isn't it? Her eyes narrowed. I added quickly, I'm sure he only does it for you, to give you the life you deserve. And just like that, her pride fought against her suspicion. Two beasts tearing at each other inside her chest. I walked her home that night, letting her ramble about the stress of wedding planning. At the door, she sighed dramatically. Sometimes I feel like people are waiting for us to fail, she murmured. I stepped closer, lowering my voice as if sharing something sacred. Then don't give them the satisfaction, I said gently. Adrian loves you. He'd be a fool to risk losing you. Her eyes softened at my words, but beneath them, doubt flickered. Exactly where I wanted it. As I turned away, the city lights flickering against the dark sky, I whispered to myself, she thinks I'm her friend. She thinks I admire her. She doesn't realize. Every smile I give, every word I speak is a thread. And soon the web will close around her. And in the shadows, I smiled because the mask of friendship was the most dangerous weapon of all. I had been waiting for this moment, weeks of preparation, weeks of weaving my web. Every photograph, every message, every whisper of our secret meetings had been gathered like jewels in a crown. Now the crown would be hers to wear, heavy, poisoned, and sharp enough to cut. Celine Moreau, the fiancée, the thief, the woman who had smirked at my pain years ago in Paris. It was time she felt the weight of truth and the sting of betrayal. I chose the place carefully, a quiet cafe tucked away from the city noise, where the light was soft, almost forgiving. But there would be no forgiveness here. When she arrived, she looked as flawless as ever. Her dress hugged her figure like it had been sewn on her body, her makeup perfect, her hair cascading in polished waves. She ordered champagne without glancing at the menu, a midday indulgence she treated as her right. She smiled at me, sharp and gleaming. "Well, Selena, what did you want to meet about? I assume it's important if it pulled me away from my morning." I smiled too, warm, polite, dangerous. "It is," I said simply. Then I slid the envelope across the table. Her fingers toyed with the seal before she opened it. I leaned back, watching her carefully, the way a hunter watches the deer step into the clearing. The first photograph slipped into her hands. Adrian, his lips against my neck, his eyes closed, his hand around my waist. Another photo, another night, another kiss beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp. Messages printed on paper, words of longing he had texted me while she slept beside him. "Can't stop thinking about you. You're the only one who makes me feel alive." The evidence was undeniable. If she wanted to scream, if she wanted to break, she had every reason. But Celine did not scream. She did not cry. She smirked. "I know," she said casually, sliding the photos back into the envelope as though they were receipts she no longer needed. I blinked, pretending to misunderstand. "You know?" "Of course." She sipped her champagne, eyes glittering. "Adrian has always been like this, tripping over himself for the next pretty distraction. Men are weak, Selena, but weakness can be managed." Her voice was smooth, but underneath, I heard contempt. Not for him. For everyone. For me. My lips parted slightly as if in shock, but inside I was smiling, because she had just revealed her truth. She had always known. She had accepted his betrayal because it kept her comfortable, because she could use him. "Useful?" I asked softly, my tone laced with curiosity. "Is that what you call a man who disgraces you behind your back?" Her eyes narrowed, lips curving again. "Adrian gets me into the right rooms. He signs the right contracts. He carries my image beside his. That is usefulness. Loyalty is optional." I leaned forward, lowering my voice until it was almost a whisper. "But what happens when usefulness fades? When Adrian's failures begin to drag your name down? Do you think the world will still see you as untouchable? Or will they laugh at you for tying yourself to a man who can't even keep his own house in order?" For the first time, her smirk faltered. Just for a breath, I had found the crack. I let silence stretch, then slid the envelope back to her side. "You don't need to protect him," I murmured. "In fact, if Adrian were to fall, you could rise even higher, alone, stronger, free." Her eyes locked on mine, calculating, weighing, hungering. Finally, she tilted her head, her voice soft but sharp. "And how do you suggest I let him fall?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Sometimes all it takes is one deal, one contract slipping through his hands. He's already vulnerable, a nudge at the right time, and he'll lose everything." The seed had been planted, and Celine, greedy and ambitious, watered it herself. Within days, she began to pull threads. At first, small. A delayed signature, a quiet word of doubt whispered to the wrong investor, a subtle correction in figures that drew suspicion. Adrian, oblivious, carried on as if the world adored him. He bragged about the $1 million contract he was about to secure. He walked into meetings with that same swagger, that same grin I had once mistaken for strength. And all the while, the ground beneath him was crumbling. The day of the deal arrived. The boardroom was packed. Executives shuffled papers. Investors adjusted ties. Anticipation buzzed in the air. Adrian stood at the head of the table, polished and confident, ready to claim his victory. But when the final signatures were called for, hesitation filled the room. Questions, doubts, numbers that didn't add up. One by one, investors pulled their pens away. One by one, chairs shifted back. And then, silence. The deal was gone. I watched from the corner as Adrian's face drained of color. He stumbled over excuses, his voice rising with desperation. "This isn't my fault. There's been a mistake. I'll fix this, I swear." But no one listened. The executives exchanged glances. The investors closed their folders. His words fell flat. The contract had collapsed. Millions lost. Reputation shattered. By the time the meeting ended, whispers were already spreading. Adrian Mercer had failed. He stormed out, his tie askew, his hands trembling with rage. I followed at a distance, savoring the sight. Outside, in the cool air, I saw him punch the wall, his voice cracking with fury. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity has no place in revenge. That night, Selene called me, her voice smooth, triumphant. "He's ruined," she said simply, and I made sure of it. I let out a quiet laugh, masking my satisfaction with sympathy. "You did what you had to," I replied. She chuckled, low and cruel. "I only protected myself." And when we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine. I stood by the window, looking down at the glittering city. Adrian Mercer had lost his deal, his fortune, his name, and the blade that cut him wasn't mine. It was Celine's, because sometimes the sharpest weapon is not the knife you hold. It's the one you place carefully in someone else's hand, and then simply watch them swing it. The night was perfect, not for them, but for me. The house gleamed under the warm glow of chandeliers, polished floors reflecting the light like liquid gold. Every corner of it whispered luxury, promise, new beginnings. Adrian and Selene walked in together, arms linked, their eyes wide with delight. "This is it," Adrian murmured, glancing around. "Our new beginning." Celine's lips curved into a smile, her voice soft but triumphant. "Finally, the place we deserve." I followed behind them, quiet, calm, the hostess of a celebration they didn't yet understand. They drifted through the rooms like children in a dream. Selene ran her hand across the marble countertop. Adrian opened the doors to the balcony, breathing in the night air as though it already belonged to him. I leaned against the wall, watching them explore, like actors rehearsing lines for a play whose ending I had already written. Finally, Adrian turned to me, a grin spreading across his face. "Selena, thank you for arranging everything. But I have to ask, why are you being so generous? What's in it for you?" I smiled slow, cold. "You'll see." We gathered in the living room. They sat together on the sofa, their bodies close, but their ambitions worlds apart. I stood before them, glass of wine in my hand, the weight of revelation pressing against my lips. For a moment, I let the silence hang. Then, I struck. "This house," I said softly, "is beautiful, isn't it?" Selene nodded eagerly. "It's perfect. Exactly what I pictured." Adrian laughed, reaching for her hand. "Ours at last." I tilted my head. "Ours." I set my glass down, walked toward them slowly, each step deliberate. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Their smiles faltered. "What do you mean?" Adrian asked, his brow furrowing. I reached into my bag, pulled out the documents, deeds, titles, proof, and laid them on the table. "This house doesn't belong to you," I whispered. "It belongs to me. The room went still. Celine's fingers froze against Adrian's sleeve. He snatched the papers, scanning them with frantic eyes. No, this can't be right. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, I cut in sharply. My voice no longer warm, no longer polite. It was steel. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I straightened, my eyes burning into theirs. And then, with a smile that tasted of ash and fire, I spoke. Ta-da! I spread my arms slightly as if unveiling a masterpiece. I am Vivian Hale, the woman you betrayed, the woman you mocked, the woman you thought the fire had destroyed. Adrian's face turned white. Celine's mouth dropped open, a flicker of recognition flashing across her perfect mask, and I delivered the final blow. I am the one you left behind, Adrian, and you, Celine, you stood there, watching, smirking, while my world burned. But tonight, I take back everything. Adrian surged to his feet, shaking his head. No, this is insane. Vivian died. You can't be her. I did die, I replied, my voice sharp as glass. And from those ashes, Selena Ward was born. The woman standing before you now, the woman who owns this house, the woman who owns your secrets. He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. Vivian, please. It wasn't what you think. You don't understand. I cut him off with a laugh. Don't you dare speak to me of understanding. You shattered me. You left me to rot in the flames. And now, it's your turn to burn. Celine snapped then, yanking her hand away from him. This is your fault, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. You couldn't even keep your affairs hidden. You couldn't control yourself for once, Adrian. Adrian turned on her, his face twisted with rage. My fault? You were supposed to protect me. You sabotaged my deal, didn't you? You cost me everything. Her laugh was sharp, cruel. I saved myself. Did you really think I'd let your pathetic mistakes drag me down? Their voices rose, colliding like thunder. Accusations. Betrayals. Words like knives hurled across the room. You used me. You ruined me. You were nothing but weak. And you were nothing but greedy. The perfect couple, tearing each other apart right before my eyes. I stood in the center, watching the empire they had built on, lies collapse into rubble. And then I laughed, not softly, not politely, but loud, sharp, cold. They froze, their rage turning toward me. I raised my glass once more, my smile carved in ice. You deserve each other, every scream, every betrayal, every bitter word. I stepped back, my gaze sweeping over them like a blade. But the truth is, you have nothing left to hold on to. Not love, not loyalty, not even this house. It's over. Adrian sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. Celine glared at him, her eyes burning with hatred, and I turned away, the sound of their ruin echoing behind me. The night was perfect. Not for them. For me. Because revenge had never tasted so sweet. The end didn't come quietly for them. It came like thunder. Loud. Public. Unforgiving. Adrian Mercer, once a man who carried himself like a king, fell piece by piece until there was nothing left to wear but shame. I watched from the shadows as his life unraveled, and every second of it felt like justice. First, it was the company. He walked into his office one morning with that same swagger, shoulders straight, tie crisp, only to find security guards waiting at his door, his access revoked, his name erased from the system, His employees whispered as he passed, their eyes darting away quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the contempt. I could almost hear their thoughts. So this is the man who thought he was untouchable. Adrian stormed out, but his pride couldn't follow him. It was trapped in that glass building, shattered on the polished floor he once owned. Then came the money. Bank accounts frozen, investments pulled, partners washing their hands of him as if he carried a disease. At dinners where he once boasted about million-dollar contracts, he now sat alone, ignored, while others toasted to his failure. His suits began to look worn. His watch no longer gleamed. He had been stripped of the armor he wore so proudly. And beneath it, there was nothing. And finally, the home. The house he promised Celine. The house they had envisioned as the crown jewel of their new life. Not his. Never his. It was mine. Legally, irrevocably, mine. I watched him one evening from the window as he stood outside the gates, his fists trembling at his sides, his face pale with rage. He shouted into the night, cursing the world, cursing fate, cursing me. But his voice was nothing more than noise carried away by the wind, because no amount of shouting could change the truth. That house, his symbol of success, of legacy, had never belonged to him. And now it stood as a monument to his failure. Celine's fall was quieter, but cruelty has many shades, and hers came painted in humiliation. Her name had been her weapon, her beauty, her status, her flawless mask of confidence, tools she wielded like daggers. But when Adrian fell, the mask cracked. Her allies distanced themselves. Her so-called friends stopped calling. Invitations vanished like smoke, and in their place came whispers. That's Celine Moreau, isn't it? She thought she could build her life on him. She should have known better. The same women she once mocked now smirked when she entered the room. Men who once admired her beauty now spoke of her with disdain. Her empire was never hers. It had always been borrowed, and when the foundation crumbled, she was left with nothing but dust in her hands. I saw her once, weeks after the scandal. Her makeup couldn't hide the sleepless nights. Her eyes darted nervously in public as if searching for a lifeline that no longer existed. She was still beautiful, but it was the fragile beauty of glass cracked down the center. One wrong touch, and she would shatter. That was her price. Together, Adrian and Celine were stripped bare. He, jobless, homeless, disgraced. She, exposed, abandoned, ridiculed. Two predators who once laughed as I bled, now left to devour each other in desperation. The final act came on the steps of my house. I stood above them, the owner, the victor, the executioner of their pride. They screamed at each other, their voices ragged with hatred. "You destroyed me!" Adrian roared, his face red, his veins bulging. "You destroyed yourself!" Celine snapped, her finger stabbing the air. "You were weak! I only revealed it!" Their words tumbled over each other. Curses, accusations, venom spat in every direction. It was chaos, and it was glorious. I lifted my glass, savoring the taste of wine and vengeance. "The price of betrayal," I said, my voice steady, slicing through their chaos, "is never cheap." They turned toward me, silence falling like a curtain. Their faces, pale, desperate, broken. Adrian's eyes begged for mercy. Celine's lips trembled with fury, but I gave them nothing. No forgiveness, no comfort, only the truth. "You thought you could destroy me and walk away untouched, but betrayal always collects its debt, and tonight, you've paid in full." Adrian collapsed onto the steps, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with a sound that might have been a sob, might have been a growl. Celine stared at him with open disgust, then turned her glare on me. "You're a monster!" she hissed. I smiled. "Perhaps, but I am a monster of your making." They left then, not as a couple, not as lovers, but as two hollow shells walking side by side into a night that no longer wanted them. Step by step, their silhouettes shrank beneath the street lamps until they disappeared. I watched them go, and I felt nothing but peace. Later, as dawn broke, I packed a single suitcase. I had won. I had taken everything they once stole from me, their careers, their reputations, their home. They had gambled with my life years ago, and the debt was finally settled. I stood once more on the threshold of the house, the city stretching before me. The wind was cool, brushing against my face. This face they had given me, this mask forged from pain and fire. I whispered to myself, the price had to be paid, and they paid it, with everything. I turned, stepping into the car that waited for me. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, then vanished from sight. And with it, so did the last remnants of Vivian Hale. Now, I was only Selena Ward. And Selena Ward did not regret, because my justice was never forgiveness. It was ruin, and they had learned too late that betrayal is always the most expensive debt of all.